Thank you to the Center for Real Estate for having me and giving us the opportunity to share our work with you today. My name is Pratt, and I am not a real estate professional or practitioner yet. And so I've learned a lot today from all of the speakers and the panelists and the conversations, and I really appreciate that. I've Googled a lot of acronyms, so it's been a fruitful day for me. Share a little bit with you about who I am. So I consider myself a social entrepreneur, an artist, curator, writer. I'm a mom, and I have a blend of academic and professional experiences that span the for-profit and nonprofit sectors. I worked in management consulting for a little over a decade before going to the nonprofit sector, and then finding my way to Sweetwater Foundation. And all along the way, and as I made my transition from the for-profit to the nonprofit space, I was really looking for more meaning in my work, and I found it in the nonprofit sector, but amidst the ever-growing socioeconomic inequalities and the climate crisis, it was just no longer enough for me to continue to work just doing good within the same social structures that are fundamentally failing us and our planet right now, which led me to search for new solutions and ultimately led me to Sweetwater Foundation. So Sweetwater Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that works on the south side of Chicago, where far too many communities look like this. The community in which we work is located at the nexus of the Englewood and Washington Park communities on the Chicago south side, in an area that's had rampant disinvestment for about a century. One thing I do want to note is that it's important to know that even though I'm here representing Sweetwater Foundation, I'm not representative of our organization or the community that we serve. So Sweetwater Foundation is a predominantly Black organization working within a Black community. And the majority of our team and our leadership reflects that community. And we always feel like it's important because that representation matters, especially when you're doing community work. So we're working amidst an area that's full of problems, but we like to think of ourselves as solutionaries. We are a group of individuals who are working hard on the ground, rolling up our sleeves, doing the work that needs to be done. We are, like I said, a 501c3 non-for-profit organization, but we intentionally do not talk about our work calling it a mission. Instead, we call it a practice. And our practice is something we call regenerative neighborhood development, which is about creating safe and inspiring spaces that curate healthy intergenerational communities that really transform the ecology of these so-called blighted neighborhoods. And blight is a term that you guys are all familiar with blight. Do you know the origins of the term blight? Yeah. It's actually like a botanical term or an agricultural term referring to the death and decay of a crop. And somewhere along the way, especially I believe, and I don't want to say its origins is in real estate, transforming that term, but it does come from the death and decay of a crop. And we've applied that term to talk about places where people still live and continue to live. And it's also important to think about blight as like this mysterious term, as if these communities mysteriously had this like death and decay that happened, rather than there being intentional policies and practices that created those circumstances. So our practice, regenerative neighborhood development, what we do is we start with an asset-based approach. We first acknowledge, honor the wisdom and the strength of the communities that already exist in these spaces. And we use a blend of art, architecture, agriculture, aquaponics, carpentry, education, and urban planning to literally rebuild and regenerate neighborhoods. So that's our practice. A little bit about our history. So we've been doing this work for about a decade. Actually, tomorrow is Sweetwater Foundation's 10th anniversary since we've been incorporated as a non-for-profit organization. And we started out with small-scale aquaponic systems in classrooms, and this is in Milwaukee. I see Darren shaking his head. So the roots of our organization were in Milwaukee, looking at the potentials of aquaponics and other urban agricultural practices to address issues like water, right? So looking at STEAM education, and as you grow that practice and you're working with young people, if you're working with elementary students, a little cute classroom system like this, you can learn a lot. When you're working in a high school, you can create a more commercial system. And that's where skills like plumbing and carpentry came into play, because you're building things. And then we took our practice also outside, so building garden beds at schools. But we moved from schools to art galleries, and then to vacant buildings, and ultimately to translated our practice to a neighborhood context. In 2014, that's really where our organization expanded its practice, moving to the neighborhood context, and we applied our practice and also our theory of change to the community where we now operate, which we call the Perry Ave Commons. That's what we call the 4 city blocks that we have transformed. So the City of Chicago's Department of Planning and Development asked us to take over some vacant land in this community that's at the nexus of the Englewood and Washington Park communities. And what you're looking at is what was once at the heart of the Perry Ave Commons. It was, a vacant space that had been this way for a decade, and there were no plans of it becoming anything other than just that. And the history of this site, it's a scarred site. So in the upper left corner is the Mosley School. This was a school for social adjustment. If you Google it, you'll see words like a school for incorrigibles. In the community, it was known as a school for bad boys. It was a literal pipeline to prison. The school was actually closed in the 1990s. It was then repurposed as a homeless shelter, and it was ultimately torn down. And it became just another space in a community that had rampant vacancy. So you can see an aerial view on the right side, and the big square in the middle, well, in the upper middle, is where that school once was. It's important to know that this community did not always look like that, right? So on the left-hand side, you see the Sanborn map from 1949. That was not that long ago. 1949 was not that long ago. That red line right there reflects that home, which actually the home in red, that parcel, that home was torn down because this is a new build. This is what that community looked like in 1949. It was a neighborhood densely populated with homes. In those homes lived families. Those families made up a community. And it was really this prescriptive pathology of redlining and other racist and degenerative policies and practices that caused this ecology of absence that you see on the right-hand side. So it's just important for us to think about the history when we're talking about these so-called blighted communities and how they got that way. So this house, which we'll talk a little bit about later, and it looks different now. Again, this is the context in which the Perry Ave Commons exists. And this house is right across the street from where that school once stood. So for the past 5 years, it was 2014 when Sweetwater Foundation first got access to that city block where you saw the school and this house. In that time, we have completely transformed this neighborhood, this community. So what we have done is through a series of projects and also through our educational outreach programming. So we have an apprenticeship program that works with local youth and young adults that engage in a number of what we call STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, agriculture, aquaponics. We have a lot in the A bucket. And then mathematics. We do a lot of educational programming and outreach around the different elements of agriculture, carpentry, any number of other elements of what we call urban ecology. So we've used that educational programming to really build the Perry Ave Commons from the ground up. So today, what was once this vacancy now consists of elements like the Perry Ave Community Farm, which is a full city block farm with more than 250 rows of locally grown produce. We even have some fruit trees. And this farm feeds more than 200 families each week during the harvest season. We have the Think Do House. So this is that boarded up house that you saw. The Think Do House is where, we say, you think it, you do it. This is the heart of Sweetwater Academy. It is a place where the community gathers, where we have classes, workshops, we break bread. We do art, like screen printing. We do screen print classes. So this is like a rubbed, on my shirt, a rubbed piece of timber from which we made a screen. And then we do screen printing workshops. And we do food. We have volunteer days. This is the Think Do House. We have a community workshop, and this is where we turn waste into resources. That's another one of our themes, is turning waste to resources. There's a lot of construction that I just saw on campus walking here today. And all of the large windows that you see come in big wooden crates. So the city of Chicago, the high rises that go up, one of the local Southside businesses called U.S. Architectural Metal and Glass is one of our value-based partners. They put glass windows into the CTA bus stops, the tall high rises, and these are the crates. It's their waste stream, things that would go into a landfill or they actually have to pay to dispose of. And through our programming, we deconstruct and then reconstruct new things like garden beds, home goods. And so in the process, our apprentices learn the deconstruction process. They learn design, they learn furniture building, carpentry. They help us to lead workshops. And this is furniture at the Hyde Park Art Center on the patio that we did through our programming. It also creates a new microeconomy for the local community because we are actually selling the things that we build. This is the Thought Barn. So now at the heart and the center of the Commons, where that school once stood, is the first timber frame barn in the city of Chicago since the Great Fire in 1871. This is a hand-raised structure that we did as part of a block party in 2017. So these are like members of the Sweetwater team, the Sweetwater community, in partnership with Trillium Dell Timber Works, which is located in Western Illinois. We built a barn. And this is now where we have any number of arts, culture, and community programming events. This is our annual Juneteenth celebration, which is a cultural tradition we have brought back to the community. We have dance performances. And you can see in here that we enclose our structure once it starts to get cold. This is when it was partially enclosed. In partnership with the Hyde Park Jazz Fest, we had a dance and musical performance at night. We had started to enclose because they were doing projections on the walls. So it's really the space that was in the so-called blighted community has become a center for arts and culture. We have lots of events. Lots of community organizations come to us to utilize our resources. And we also do a lot of farm-to-table dinners. Some other things that are at the Commons, we have a repurposed shipping container we call the Think Do Pod or the Smart Pod. It's been activated with solar panels, and that's where we do our seed starting. We consider it a living learning laboratory. It's a space where when we have K through 12 field lessons, kids can come in, they do seed starting with us to help our farm get started. This is 5731 South Lafayette Avenue. Faraji had talked about something about these granny houses, and he had talked about in communities where elders pass and may not have living relatives or relatives able to take on property. And so, especially in Black and brown communities, you have wealth that's lost because it's not passed on. And this is a perfect example of this granny house. There was an elder living in this home. She passed away. She didn't have any family locally. So the house sat vacant for about a year. It was squatted in. For a while, we boarded it up just because it was right on our site. And her family ended up donating the home to us, or we purchased it for $10, and we paid the back taxes because they got wind of the work that we were doing, and they wanted to support it. But her family lived out of state, and they were also elders. But this is an example of what happens, what normally would happen in the city of Chicago, is it goes, and this is what's happening, a degenerative process, 2 houses down. It's Mr. Williams' home. No living relatives. They can't find it. It's stuck in probate court, and it's since been acquired through tax sales. And Sweetwater Foundation is right now working with the city and also with the purchaser of the tax sale to hopefully bring that property back to life, but it's been degenerating for almost 3 years now, and we're not sure it's going to be able to be brought back to life. It might have to be torn down. But this is an example of a house that we rebuilt. And it's a blurry picture there, but we did the complete rehab, our team. We were the general contractors on it, and that's me doing some work, because those of you who have been to Sweetwater Foundation, everybody there does work. And we had talked early on about who might be missing in the room when we talk about the stakeholder, and we talked about potentially end users, even though as people who occupy real estate on a daily basis, we're all sort of end users. But I would argue that labor is missing from this conversation a lot. We talk about development and all these things, but who is doing the work and how do they factor into the equation? So at Sweetwater, we also engage in all elements of that. So the Reconstruction House now has been activated as an art gallery on the first floor, on the main level, and then it's live-work residencies on the upper levels, and providing much-needed transitional housing for our apprentices and other folks on our team or in the community. And we also have fellows and artists in residence that stay with us. This summer, one of our big projects was activating 6 empty lots. They're city-owned, and 1 or 2 of them in the mix might be privately owned, maybe. We've been mowing this lawn. Mr. Homer, who is a Southside resident, lives not too far away. He's an elder. We've always mowed his lot and the adjacent lots, most of which are city-owned. We just activated and made it a community park this summer. We hand-raised this timber frame pavilion in about 4 hours in the afternoon in July, activated it for 6 weeks. And this was actually commissioned for the 2019 Chicago Architecture Biennial. So in late August, this was deconstructed, taken to the Chicago Cultural Center, reconstructed, and it's been there. And our work, along with an art installation that is inside of it, has been viewed by more than 500,000 people as part of the biennial. But we weren't going to leave just a vacant space. So after we deconstructed, we constructed this. And both of these we did purposely with the intention of thinking about potential housing models as we move forward to redevelop the commons. So all of this work that we've done for the past 5 years has been about, what can you do with a radical imagination? And that's how we were able to transform this into what we believe is a living demonstration of a new model of neighborhood development that consists of all of these elements. And in the process, we have literally brought nature back to the commons, and you can see it in person. So a few final thoughts. Our work, we consider it radical, but by that I don't mean like radical as in extreme. We think of our work as radical as fundamental, of or relating to a root, or going back to our origins, really trying to seek out the wisdom of our elders, of our ancestors, and also nature itself, to have a regenerative approach, to be thinking about the triple or quadruple bottom line rather than just the traditional bottom line. And as we go into 2020, we are all about having a clarity of vision. 2020, clarity of vision. And for us, that means we have a very clear vision about what we're doing next. And we have a vision for a 21st century ecological way of living and of doing neighborhood development. So we will be doing our first ground up new build of housing in 2020 as a demonstration. And we're partnering with folks like John and Kate from the Center for Real Estate to help make that a reality. And so really excited to be here. We've done work so far, everything that you've seen with a relatively modest budget and a very small but mighty team, but we are looking for partners and supporters as we move forward who share our values and a passion for doing work in a new way and doing the work that needs to be done. And just the last thing that I'll say is, reflecting upon today and this notion of transformative real estate and how it's defined. Because I know early on, as you guys opened it up, there was a discussion of, what does it even mean? And we're here sort of to define it together. And when I think about transformative real estate, I think that it means real estate has to move from being transactional to transformative. Even when, in my experience, and when we look at the community development programs that engage community and have, someone from the community, is there at the table, but really on the ground, oftentimes it's still transactional. It's engaging the community to have a successful transaction, which is your development that reflects the PowerPoint presentation that you just gave. And so you bring, different members of the community together, but it's for that. It doesn't reflect a long-term relationship with that community, a commitment about what happens. And so, I think one of the students brought up proximity. I heard Ernst talking about practicing values and your value systems every day. And I think that's really at the heart of transformative real estate, is moving it from being transactional to transformative, and you can't have that when you're only thinking about the deal. So I'll pause there. Last thing I'll say is there grows the neighborhood. It's our tagline. Apoya, there goes the neighborhood. But Thank you for the opportunity to share our work.
No,